What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in? This poor girl walked into my lecture by mistake about halfway through. This particular professor really enjoys talking to all of his students and was super engaging even with 400 plus students in his class. When the girl walked in, my professor stopped teaching, looked at the girl and asked if she was in the class. She said she was and began walking towards the front where the open seats were. This is a fairly large lecture hall and all 200 students, approximate how many actually show up to class, were now forced to watch this poor girl walk towards a seat because the professor didn't continue talking and just stared at her. She got close to the front and I think the pressure of the whole room got to her and she said, "Actually no I'm not," and turned around and we all had to watch this poor girl climb back up the stairs and out of the hall. I was literally watching my worst nightmare. I did basically this, went to an exam on the wrong day, sat there while a few hundred exams were passed out. Okay, you may flip over your exam. Put my name and ID at the top. Look at first page dumbfounded by questions. Look at second, same. 2 minutes into an exam I had every eye on me as I walked down to the front to turn in the test and tell them I was in the wrong place, then all the way to the back to leave. I've done worse though. When I was a kid my family's van broke down so we all had to squeeze into my dad's car to go to a funeral. Anyways, my older sister had to sit on my lap. Yep, you guessed it. I got a boner and she freaked out and started screaming. I would just cut all contact with everyone and go live in the forest for the rest of my life. Man, I'd just crawl right into that grave next to grandpa. Had a good run. Pep pep. But I popped a boner with my sister on my lap. I guess life just isn't my thing. My 79-year-old mother-in-law with Alzheimer's telling us that she had had sex the previous night with another resident of her nursing home. She had been celibate for 20 years up until then, we think. Boss of mine worked in a retirement home. Apparently, they have a huge STD problem in those homes because why wear protection when your ovaries don't work? The bright side is if you're a virgin all you have to do is wait till you're old and decrepit, get put in a home, buy tons of Viagra, and get your game on. I was at a funeral for one of my husband's relatives. On my way in, an employee of the funeral home asked me when I was due. I wasn't pregnant, but I'm fat and was wearing an Empire waistcoat so I wasn't offended. As I signed the guest book I corrected her and tried to defuse the situation with a joke about burning that coat later. But she just wouldn't stop. She kept trying to apologize and explain herself and I just wanted to run away. Then I was stuck in a small room with her for the next 2 hours. I have sort of an inverse story. When I was pregnant, I gained a lot of weight. One day, while I was very pregnant, I was riding up an elevator and someone on the other side waved at me as they were coming down. I did not know them, but I'm friendly so I waved back. They then realized their mistake and came up to explain. They said, "I'm sorry you looked like my wife," to which I cheerfully replied, "Oh, when is she due?" His wife wasn't pregnant. That's a noof if I've ever seen one. I was looking at my mom's phone calls. She wanted to show me some pictures from what she did that weekend. I swiped one too many times and came across one of her nudes. I felt my soul jolt out of my body seeing that shit. My mom added me to her Google photo album, then forgot. You can guess the rest. I accidentally walked in on my grandmother while she was nude and turned around so quickly to run I broke my toe on the door jamb. I screamed sorry grandma while limping away. Then I heard her cackling at me. I was riding in the passenger seat with my mom, who has always been strict and very tight-knit several years ago, when for some reason she decided to completely open up to me about all of her drug experimentation and sexual exploits in the 60s, and the time she did cocaine with Steve Jobs at a fancy restaurant in the 80s. It was a very uncomfortable eye-opener and I was trapped listening to it. Your mom did cocaine with Steve Jobs. Her ex-husband was an executive with the firm that managed Apple's first large-scale ad campaign. After the first Macintosh launch they went out to a 5-star restaurant in LA and railed lines of blow under the table apparently. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that knowledge. Last summer my wife and I were browsing for random crap in Pier 1. I'm wandering around the store aimlessly and see my wife kneeling down inspecting some merchandise on the bottom shelf. I approach her from behind, slightly tap the top of her head, and go, boop. It was not my wife, just someone who looked almost exactly like her from the back. She looks up at me. All I managed to say was, "Oh. I thought I was married to you. Sorry." For some reason the fact that you said, "I thought I was married to you," instead of the normal, "I thought you were my wife," is infinitely hilarious to me. Upvote for letting me know I'm not the only one that randomly boops. Okay, so me and some friends were at a restaurant and a buddy of mine was telling us about this new girl he just started going out with a few days back. Well, another friend started telling us about this girl that he banged the previous night. The conversation went on for a minute and finally somebody asked for the name of the girl that he had banged, and it turns out it was a girl that the other friend had started dating a few days earlier. Q narrowly avoided fight as we convinced him it's better to find out she's shitty now rather than later. The two guys still no longer speak though. My best friend waiting to tell her parents that she's gay until when I was over for dinner. How was the food though? But they had spaghetti, you know, a noodle that is straight until it gets hot and wet, then it's covered in balls and sauce. I walked in on my roommate in senior year of college banging his girlfriend. We had a rule about a hat on the door if we wanted privacy. There was no hat when I came back one morning and I got a full eye-level side view of him and her mid-thrust because he had the top bunk. They kind of laughed it off but was pretty awkward for me. Could have been worse. At least it was his girlfriend. Yeah right. Cold bean OP's mom instead. I used to run a restaurant and had inherited an employee with a slew of mental health issues. She had massive anxiety issues and just couldn't handle the pressure of working in a restaurant. She'd break down and cry over simple mistakes if she felt she was making too many. It was extremely unfortunate, but I was terribly underprepared to coach someone like that. One day, during downtime, the cooks were shooting the shit and recounting stories of weird ex-coworkers. I opened up my yap and said, "Who was the one who kept crying every time they'd screw up?" She was 2 feet away and literally responded with, "Me." "So are you two dating?" He said yes at the same time I said no, to which his friend told him, "I told you you didn't ask clearly enough." Edit, I accidentally mixed up him saying yes and me saying no. Reminds me of the time I was driving a girl back from a date when we got in a car wreck, rolled the car and everything, dragged her out through the window as she's bawling. When we were talking to the cop he asked us how long we'd been together. She said we were just friends. Not that I didn't have it coming. "Sir, we are going to have to write you a ticket. Your accident was caused by going too fast in a friend zone." My ex-wife later came out as a lesbian, and we divorced. Years later, I went to her wedding, where she married her now wife, which was one of my ex-girlfriends. When I was in high school, I was with my girlfriend at the time and her family at the mall shopping. Walking around the store we all get separated and I was all alone. I wandered around until I saw the back of my girlfriend. Being how horny teenagers are, I sneak up behind her, grab her butt and reach around and grab her boob. She screams, turns around and guess what, it's her mom. We stared at each other for a second and she laughed. I immediately turned red and ran away. I was so embarrassed, I had to leave. I couldn't be around my girlfriend's mother for 2 months. I was so embarrassed. In my defense, they had very similar physiques. TLDR. Snuck up on my girlfriend, grabbed her butt and boob. Turned out it was her mom. Well, alright. Second base with her mom. Was unexpectedly in the car ride with my boyfriend's parents on their way to sign their divorce papers. Kind of similar vein. My last ex before my husband wanted to stay friends even though we had a messy breakup and I left him. I thought he would want me to duck off but he kept insisting that we still hang out as a friends. Out of guilt I obliged. Over time he started seeing someone else and then he still kept getting me to hang out with them. I couldn't tell if things were getting more weird or less weird so I obliged. One evening I'm hanging out with my ex, Bill, at their place, when his GF, Tammy, comes home from work and looks kinda nervous. Before I know it she launches into this story about having just hooked up with a coworker, as I'm desperately wishing to GTFO. My ex was visibly upset and they had a huge fight about it right in front of me. During the fight it also came out that they had been trying to groom me for a threesome. That was the last time I saw them, but they are still together. When I was a kid, we were on holiday and decided to go to a church. While we were there I decided that I would be funny if I would slap my dad's ass with both hands. So I ran in full speed to maximize the impact of the slap. I ended up slapping a stranger who also happened to walk next to a woman with a stroller in his hands, which made me think it was my dad. It was even worse that my parents saw it as well. I once followed a man out of a grocery store, across a small parking lot, and tried to get into his car with him because I thought it was my dad. Didn't figure out my mistake until I saw him look across the top of the car at me, trying to get into the passenger side, with a super confused look on his face. Cue my actual dad running up breathlessly, waving his hands and yelling at me. The fear and puzzlement he must have felt. The fear and puzzlement he must have felt. Sorry dad, this family is just not working out for me. I have decided to move on. You have been visited by the Sauce Chihuahua. You will be blessed with good pasta, but only if you comment simmer well papa. PG! On top, food chain, won't stop, new game, hot box that blue haze, one lock, 2 chains, no bras, 2 babes, mic drop, new stage, lights in my rear view, 5 cops, full race, faster than a Tesla, they say I'm exhausted, looking for success, like I'm crazy and lost it, higher than a jet, guess my weed is a rocket, the comments that my vids get are wild.